As of the morning of March 16, 2026, the President of the United States made a direct appeal to 7 allied nations, asking them to deploy warships to the Strait of Hormuz. The request was clear, urgent, and highly strategic, but the response was even clearer. Every single country said no, publicly, firmly, and on the record. This wasn't a quiet diplomatic hesitation behind closed doors. These were explicit refusals, delivered in press briefings, official statements, and interviews. It immediately raised a critical question. Why would every major ally of the United States reject such a request at a moment of escalating global tension? The situation didn't end there. After receiving no response through formal channels, Donald Trump took to Truth Social, calling on nations including China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom to contribute naval forces. Still, there was silence. No commitments, no signs of movement. Then the tone shifted. In an interview with the Financial Times, Trump warned that refusing to support the United States would be very bad for the future of NATO. It was no longer framed as a request for cooperation. It sounded like a warning. Yet even that did not produce results. Soon after, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, reinforced the pressure. He stated that the United States welcomes, encourages, and even demands Allied participation. That single word, demands, marked a turning point in the messaging. This was no longer diplomacy. It was escalation in language, reflecting urgency, frustration, and possibly a narrowing set of options. The White House followed with its own justification. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters that these nations should contribute because they are benefiting greatly from U.S. military action against Iran. The implication was simple. If the United States is carrying the burden of confronting Iran, then its allies should step forward and share the risk. But again, no country agreed. In fact, the refusal spread beyond the original list. Germany, Greece, Italy, and Spain all publicly rejected involvement, even without being formally asked. That level of unified resistance is extremely rare in modern alliance politics. So what explains it? To understand this moment, you have to look beyond the surface. This is not just a disagreement over a single military operation. It reflects deeper structural tensions within the alliance system itself. Start with the United Kingdom. Prime Minister Keir Starmer addressed the issue directly in a press conference, stating that the UK would not be drawn into a wider war and that this situation was never intended to be a NATO mission. His response was measured, cautious, and grounded in long-standing British strategic thinking. Trump's reaction, however, was personal. He mocked Starmer for saying he needed to consult his team before making a decision, suggesting that as Prime Minister, he should act decisively on his own. But in doing so, Trump publicly criticized the very democratic process that defines how decisions are made in allied governments. That moment was symbolic. It highlighted a fundamental disconnect in expectations. Germany's response was even more direct. Defense Minister Boris Pistorius summed up Berlin's position in just 7 words. "This is not our war. We did not start it." That statement carried significant weight, not just because of its clarity, but because of what it implied. Germany was drawing a clear line between alliance obligations and independent decision-making. France took a more diplomatic approach, suggesting that any potential involvement would depend on future conditions. But in reality, that was a refusal in softer language. Canada declined outright. Australia signaled hesitation. Japan emphasized legal constraints and avoided any commitment. Across Europe and beyond, the message was consistent. This conflict does not justify direct military involvement. Then came the European Union's collective stance. After a meeting of foreign ministers in Brussels, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas stated plainly that there was no appetite for entering the war. She emphasized that no country wanted to become actively involved in the conflict. That statement effectively closed the door on any immediate multinational coalition. At this point, it becomes clear that the refusals are not random or politically isolated. They follow a pattern, a shared logic that transcends individual governments. One of the most important factors is the lack of consultation. In the days leading up to the conflict, allies were not given a clear understanding of U.S. objectives, timelines, or exit strategies. Reports suggest that some were told the operation would be completed in just a few days. Now, weeks into the conflict, even Israel acknowledges that significant military operations are still ongoing. That gap between expectation and reality has consequences. Allies are being asked to commit forces without a clear definition of success or a timeline for disengagement. For any government, that is a difficult position to justify. Another factor is the state of relationships. Over the years, Trump has taken a confrontational approach toward many of these same allies, imposing tariffs, questioning NATO's value, and publicly criticizing leaders on the global stage. Those actions have left lasting impressions. When cooperation is now needed, trust becomes a critical issue, and in many cases, that trust has been weakened. Domestic politics also play a major role. Across Europe, voters are already dealing with economic pressure, particularly in energy markets. Oil prices have surged above $100 per barrel. Gas supplies are under strain. Inflation remains a concern. In that environment, sending warships into a high-risk conflict is politically dangerous. Leaders understand that such decisions could have immediate consequences at home. There's also a broader strategic concern. The current conflict is indirectly benefiting Russia. Rising oil prices translate into increased revenue for Moscow, which continues to finance its military activities. At the same time, the United States has allowed certain sanctions waivers that enable ongoing purchases of Russian oil. For European nations, this creates a contradiction. They are being asked to engage in one conflict while the economic effects strengthen another adversary. Geography adds another layer of complexity. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most strategically important waterways in the world. At its narrowest point, it is only about 21 nautical miles wide. Iran controls the northern coastline and has spent decades preparing for precisely this kind of scenario. Its capabilities include naval mines, anti-ship missiles, drones, fast attack boats, and coastal defense systems. Any attempt to secure the strait during active hostilities would be extremely challenging, even for advanced navies. What begins as an escort mission could quickly escalate into direct confrontation. Recent history reinforces this concern. The Red Sea crisis demonstrated how difficult it can be to secure major shipping routes against determined adversaries. Despite sustained efforts, disruptions continued. That experience is still fresh in the minds of military planners. But perhaps the most important development is Iran's strategy. Rather than imposing a complete blockade, Iran is controlling access selectively. It has signaled that the strait is open, but not for vessels associated with the United States or its allies. Other nations, however, may be granted passage under certain conditions. This approach changes everything. It turns the strait from a simple choke point into a diplomatic tool. Countries now face a choice: align with the United States and risk being targeted, or engage with Iran and maintain access to critical resources. Several nations have already navigated this reality. Ships linked to Pakistan, India, and Turkey have reportedly passed through the strait. China is actively negotiating. Even European countries are believed to be exploring quiet diplomatic channels. Each of these interactions has broader implications. Every agreement with Iran represents a shift, however small, in the balance of influence. It suggests that power in the region is no longer defined solely by military presence, but also by economic and diplomatic leverage. Meanwhile, the global economic impact continues to grow. Ship traffic through the strait has dropped dramatically. Oil exports have declined. Emergency reserves have been released, but prices remain volatile. The supply gap is significant, and alternative routes cannot fully compensate. Natural gas markets are also affected. Liquefied natural gas shipments, particularly from Qatar, are disrupted. This has direct consequences for Europe, which has relied heavily on LNG imports in recent years. Other sectors are feeling the pressure as well. Fertilizer supply chains are tightening. Industrial materials are delayed. The ripple effects are spreading across global markets. At the same time, tensions are rising in other regions. North Korea has conducted missile tests. China is increasing military activity around Taiwan. Strategic observers are watching closely, analyzing how this conflict unfolds and what it reveals about modern warfare. All of this contributes to a broader sense of instability. The original expectation was a rapid operation, a secure strait, and a unified response from allies. Instead, the conflict has extended, the strait is contested, and the alliance system is under visible strain. Perhaps the most striking outcome is this: the United States, despite its military strength, is facing this situation without direct Allied participation. That does not mean alliances are collapsing, but it does suggest that their limits are being tested. The next phase of this situation remains uncertain. It could move toward negotiation, further escalation, or a prolonged standoff. Each path carries its own risks, and that leads to the central question. In a conflict defined by strategy, economics, and global power dynamics, who is actually gaining the advantage? And how will the decisions made in the coming days shape the future of international alliances? That is the question the world is now watching.